These are book notes for How to Be Better at Almost Everything. It's by Pat Flynn. He is a kettlebell expert, podcaster, blogger, studied philosophy and economics, and practices guitar, good at taekwondo. He does a lot of things, and that's what his book is about, is generalism and getting, as the title says, better at almost everything. So figuring out ways to improve in different areas and then finding the intersection in them. So I'll just go through some of the concepts in the book. Great book. I'm still finishing it up, but about halfway through, and maybe I'll make some more notes in the future. First, there are these 5 principles of generalism. The 80% rule. Let me grab this note. Okay, so skill stacking is greater than specialization. Short-term specialization, number 2. Number 3 is the rule of 80%. Number 4, integration is greater than isolation. And number 5, repetition and resistance. So I'll go through those. I'll just go in order as I have them down here. The 80% rule. This is about working on any single skill that, if you look at this chart, the proficiency that you get over time, it's not going to be equal. It gets harder to improve a certain amount once you get closer to the top. Just as an example, I'll just use basketball. So if you're, let's say 99%, right? But of course this is like 99.9999. If you think of like Steph Curry and LeBron James, if you want to get to, maybe that's not the best example, but the difference between like even 95% to where they're at, it takes so much more effort, so much more time, and so many other factors as far as environment and genetics go. But then, as an example, like Steph Curry grew up around the NBA. His dad was a player, and his brother had exactly the same environment, but who knows what factors it was, but there's some separation there, even at the top. And his brother is a professional basketball. He's in the NBA, and that's successful for a lot of people. For most people that are pursuing like a career in basketball, which I am not. But the idea is that if you want to be a generalist, then that means specializing in a bunch of different things, which means you don't have time in a lot of cases to go. Once that slope starts to flatten out, once it gets harder to get from 80% to 85%, then as far as like proficiency goes, and of course that's like going to be different depending on the field, you want to stop at 80%. That's the general number, and of course that's an not quite arbitrary, but it is relative to like the skill that you're practicing. So on whatever skill you're working on, decide when a good place to stop would be and get there, and then move on to a different skill. And soon enough you'll be able to build up these different skills, and then that's where kind of like the magic happens of generalism. Next up, here we go. It is short-term skill stacking is greater than specialization. So this is generalism over specialization. This is supposed to be a Superman logo, but I put that there because Superman is the superhero that a lot of people don't find interesting because he's just good at everything. He has every superpower, which means, okay, maybe that's not as interesting as Batman, who has to, struggles with a lot of different things and has made the most of it. He's also human. Whereas Superman is, of course, this alien that has superpowers and every superpower. So, as far as interestingness goes, or being interesting, Batman probably more interesting. But who's gonna really win in a fight? Most likely Superman. So you want to, you could see where in a career or whatever you're pursuing in life, there is an advantage to generalism. As an example, there's also, for specialization, you could think of Floyd Mayweather specializes in boxing. There's always those things where people wonder how well he would do in an MMA fight, but he doesn't do it, and that's because he's top level specialization, or top level specialist in what he does. And then the 2 times that someone has entered his specialized world, he has pretty much like mopped the floor with them. Not much of a competition. So yeah, but aiming to be that kind of specialist, and if your goal becomes to be like, hey, I want to be the best in the world at something, and that's going to make me happy, a lot of times you're going to be unhappy. Just numbers wise, how many other people are pursuing that? What if it was just 100% luck? Then your chances at that point are pretty low. So having that goal to just be like top 0.1% in the world, maybe not the best idea. Next up, this idea of integration being better than isolation. Once you have a few different skills, maybe it's writing, drawing, which is not entirely like my skill here, drawing is not. But once you have these different skills, then you can work at the intersection of those things. So just as an example, like I bought this book by Flynn, and it is because he is good at writing, writes entertaining emails every day, and also just has interests that he's an expert in some things that I'm interested in. For example, I learned about him as a kettlebell he's a kettlebell expert, and I want to learn more about that. And because he is good at sales, promotion, and making good content, quality content around kettlebells, I ended up hearing about him through, I think it was I went to a kettlebell class, and they mentioned, hey, check out some of the content that Flynn has made. So yeah, just this idea of the different skills. So he's at that intersection where I do like to listen to his content, because he is an expert in, say, like, we can right here. Yeah. So it's like writing and kettlebells and videos. He's good at making video content and writing, and he's an expert with kettlebells, so right in the middle of there, definitely going to be interested in what he's making. And then I wrote some other things about like this idea of integration. Of course, Steve Jobs describes Apple at the intersection of technology and liberal arts. And then LeBron James, back to the basketball example, of course, he has the more than an athlete thing, so he's a savvy businessman. And yeah, just having that intersection helps him in different worlds. So in business, of course, like he can leverage the platform he's built through basketball to make business deals, to grow businesses. And then it kind of becomes a cycle where he is also able to it helps him basketball wise, depending on what another player's goals are. They might want to join his team to be to have kind of that halo effect as far as like outside of basketball, and knowing that their profile can grow being around him, which can be a negative for some people. But last, there's Scott Adams, who is the creator of Dilbert, and he talks about this idea of intersections as well, where he's not the best artist, he's not the funniest person he knows, and not the best writer, but he knew that right in the intersection, if he was at some proficiency, then he could be the best in the world at that intersection, and has made a very successful career out of it. Now, another principle: repetition and resistance. There are a lot of fitness metaphors in the book, and so definitely like the most straightforward thing with kettlebells. I've been doing I think it's called the program minimum or simple and sinister. So it's just kettlebell swings and get-ups, 100 swings and 10 get-ups each day. And if you just do that, then your body will get used to what you're doing day to day. But you want to have the plan where you are increasing the resistance, because you're getting the repetitions in every day, but if you increase the resistance, that's where you'll get stronger. You'll see it with if you want to do barbell exercises, a lot of exercises, it becomes clear like how to increase repetitions or resistance. With other skills, it can be less clear. So he talks about learning the guitar, and he wanted to Pat Flynn wanted to become, the best at shredding, right? But that's a little too specialized, so his guitar teacher had him learn the fundamentals and practice the fundamentals, and then you can so that's one way to increase your resistance, is to branch out into things that you aren't comfortable with, and that will create some resistance. And then with something like writing, maybe you do have the resistance. It's already hard enough for you to write a certain amount of words, and what you want to do is increase the repetition. So you, instead of trying to do that for 2 hours on Saturdays, then maybe what you can do is do it more frequently, and because you don't want to burn out, you'll lower the resistance a little bit but increase the repetition and find that kind of balance. So maybe you write for 30 minutes 4 days a week, and then you can increase it to 45 minutes, and then you can see that becomes greater than doing it once a week for just 2 hours. I'll come back to this slide. So the last principle is short-term specialization, and I'll just read this excerpt from the book. It says, for example, say you got strong at deadlifting, but then you decide to lose some weight, so you go on a diet. Chances are, while you're leaning out, your deadlift isn't going to be as strong as it was, even though you should still train the deadlift. Okay, so there's more to this excerpt, but I drew this chart, which is not the best chart, but this is supposed to show your deadlift weight increasing and then taking basketball again. Maybe while you're focusing on increasing the weight that you can lift in the deadlift, you aren't playing basketball as much, so those skills are going down. And the idea here is that you're going to specialize in the deadlift for some amount of time. Maybe you hit this like 80%, you stop, and then actually you can start focusing again on basketball. And with your new strength, then you can start making the increases to break whatever plateau you had. And you can see that how these things can work together. But it is important to just believe. It becomes that thing of like, I think this reminds me of Ray Dalio, and he has a principle in his book Principles, which is to use principles. So what can be difficult is if you see that you're just going back to the example from this book, is that you want to lose weight and you also want your deadlift strength to go up. Those aren't necessarily going to work together because you want to build some muscle, which probably means you're not going to be losing weight at the same time. So you just have to know that you have to trust in the principle that works with these other principles, that you're going to return, you're going to come back, and you'll be able to bounce back and then lose the weight that you put on, but only after you get to the proficiency that you wanted in the deadlift. And I drew this. This is supposed to be GAC, and a rubber bouncy ball, or like a wall ball, or what is it called, like a racquetball ball. Anyway, so that bounces very hard, bounces off the wall, and this is where you have to learn about yourself and learn about like the skill that you're practicing. Some skills are more like the bouncy ball. I think a common thing is like if you have a lot of muscle, you lose it a little bit, or like if you build up your strength, you ignore it for a while and then jump back into it, you're gonna be able to bounce back pretty quickly, gain that strength back. But sometimes building muscle won't happen as quick. So some things are more like so I'm thinking of like if you throw these things against the wall. So GAC, it's this, I think it was made by Nickelodeon, maybe not made by them, but definitely had commercials on Nickelodeon, and it was just like this slime so if you throw the GAC against the wall, it's not gonna bounce back really. And there are some things where you can't ignore them completely, or else you can sort of end up at zero. So in those cases, then you want to kind of constantly keep those up a little more than some other things. So it just becomes this thing where you need to learn about yourself and learn about the skills that you currently have, what it takes to maintain those, and then what you're willing to sacrifice to specialize further in something else. And then I said I would come back to this. So those were the 5 principles. Again, skill stacking created in specialization, short-term specialization, rule of 80%, integration and isolation, and then repetition and resistance. Then there are some other things in the book as just parts of of explaining the different specializations or the different principles. And one of them is this daily discipline checklist, which is a part of this great chapter just about like the meta skills that are worth focusing on. So maybe that would be like the future video I'll make, because it was something like discipline, focus, faith, maybe learning. I forget what the other things were, but the checklist is great. Just that the importance of having discipline it becomes like this thing definitely worth specializing in, so that you can mix it in. Just going back to this. So some of these circles will be sort of specialized, and then some of the circles can be more like meta skills. Like if you're great at learning how to learn, then that amplifies things. And another one that you'll commonly hear is like public speaking or just communication becomes a really something that mixes well. This was just the checklist to build up daily discipline. So, of course, you want to sleep 7 or 8 hours, and that will just help you throughout the day. Work out for 30 minutes a day, do this kettlebell. Eat protein at every meal. I'd throw in vegetables there. I think vegetables is the harder thing for me. That's a personal thing, I guess. So, and then there's this, which is supposed to be a shower head with ice cubes. Take cold showers. That just helps. Yeah, it says at least 2 minutes. And that helps to just put you in an uncomfortable state. And then meditate every day. Walk 10,000 steps. This is supposed to be like one of those watches. And then, just a tip. Pretty much all of your phones track this automatically, so you don't necessarily need a watch. I've been using the iOS Health app. This is TV. Just do without something that you need. There's a good video. Just look it up. I think it's called the Dopamine Fast, and that's more about taking the entire day off of anything that you enjoy, basically. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the whole day. I think it's good to do that like for a day every once in a while. But as far as like this book is talking about, just trying to avoid one thing for the day and switching that up. Make your bed, and then do the most difficult thing of the day first. So whatever your most important task is that you're trying to improve. And then last thing, keep a gratitude journal. this is one of the best habits that you can build up, and yeah, it definitely helps with like resiliency and grit, and yeah, just it'll help you build up your discipline. Just when things get hard, you become better at just realizing that you have a lot of things to be grateful for. And last great part of the book is that he has these profiles of generalists. Talks about people like Mark Twain and Terry Crews and how they are generalists, what they specialize in, and yeah, that can be really inspiring. And then thought I would just share like a couple people that I enjoy. So there's James Altucher, similarly has a podcast, has a background in finance and expert chess player, just a bunch of different things, and has found a way to build his platform and just create content that helps other people by working at the intersection. And it's interesting to see him now like doing the short-term specialization where he wants to become a stand-up comedian, and he knows like he's very good at that meta skill of learning, and knows that he just needs to get stage time. And he also is talking to experts, so that's one of the best things to do if you want to learn, is talk to experts. And he has the platform to do it. He has the podcast, so you can see how these things work together. Because he's good at podcasting, then comedians will want to come on his show because there's something in it for them as well. And then because of that, he can talk to these comedians about comedy and how to improve as a stand-up comedian. And then last, this is supposed to be a picture of Joe Rogan, comedian, stand-up comic, one of the most popular podcasts in the world, and similar to Pat Flynn, expert in Taekwondo, and now Joe Rogan has two black belts, or a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. So yeah, it goes to show that what kind of success you can have if you specialize in these different things and then work at that intersection of the different things that you're doing. So, and also kettlebell expert, and I think I'm guessing Joe Rogan has got, he talks about how Dan Carlin, Hardcore History, probably has gotten more people interested in history than most people ever, which is crazy to think. And it's through his podcast. And I think Joe Rogan has gotten probably more people interested in or at least interested enough to try out jiu-jitsu or to try out kettlebells than most people ever in the history of the world. So I think that's a great example of a generalist, someone who specializes in things, and he also talks to experts all the time on his podcast. So that's that. This video went a little longer than I expected, but check this book out, How to Be Better at Almost Everything by Pat Flynn. Excellent book. I'll make more videos about this in the future. Thanks a lot. Hit subscribe, thumbs up, all of those things. Appreciate it.